What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Weaponized Body Podcast. As most of you know, probably by now, if you're on social media and if you're, getting the headlines from what June is, yes, it's Pride Month, but it's also Men's Mental Health Month. And I got to thinking about this topic and just how important it is. And because I think there's a conversation that desperately needs to happen or needs to happen more often. And I feel wildly underqualified, honestly, to have this conversation. I'm not a mental health counselor. I'm not a psychologist, not a psychiatrist. And I just want to speak about mental health from my own experience. And, I hope it comes across well. This is not scripted or practiced or whatnot. I just want to talk about mental health as I see it working, having worked with, many dozens and dozens, hundreds of men really, and have been involved with some of the men's health space when it comes to men's groups. And to be honest with you, I think we're having the wrong conversation in most platforms because when we hear mental health, we immediately think like depression, anxiety, therapy, meds, diagnoses. Now, I don't want to offend anybody here. I'm not saying those things don't matter, right? Because they absolutely do. And I don't want to touch a lot on like severe clinical depression because that's a whole other animal. What I'm saying is that what we've been, what we become obsessed with is treating symptoms. And mental health symptoms being one of the symptoms you can exhibit, and just completely ignoring some of the biggest root causes. Depression, as an example, anxiety as a depression, all those things. And what I see over and over again, both in my own life and in the hundreds of patients over the last 16 years, is that a lot of men that I've encountered who think they have a mental health problem actually have a health problem. And I want to explain. So I want to tell you my story a little bit. I would think that my whole life, I would say that I've struggled in the confidence department. And I've actually done some work more recently, actually, with like inner child work. And that low confidence or lack of confidence comes from just, not feeling like I fit in or that I was accepted when I was younger, or that I was able to get attention or that I was any good at anything. And it's this whole not good enough type of mentality. And I was very, very hard on myself. And there's pros and cons to this because this has really driven me to sort of try to prove the world wrong with being very persistent and being very success driven. But it's also a detriment because my self-talk was always really poor. I was always very defensive. I was very defaulted to anger and reactive and sometimes unapproachable. And, none of this stuff came from, a good place. And I think as you mature in age and you start to build, and for myself personally, like some of the biggest personal growth vehicles for me have been getting married, starting a business, and then having a child. It demands a lot of your maturity and your growth, especially with your emotions and with your your maturity and your mental health too. And I wasn't ready for any of these challenges when they appeared in my life. I thought I was, but I had a lot of work to do, and a lot of that work was, inner work. And when things got really hard, I found myself getting really low on myself, and I would get into a big funk and what I would consider feelings of depression, just like sadness, like I was immobilized, like I was, on the couch or in my bed, just laying there in my own head and trying to work things out But then after being there for so long, realizing that I didn't do anything, and then I would I would shit on myself even more for not having done anything. We went through a lot of these cycles with my marriage. Kendra and I went through a lot of these cycles in business, when I was stuck and stagnant and unable to really get out of my own way when it came to certain aspects of the business. And then I feel like I'm having that challenge right now with my daughter who's 5, with my parenting. I find that she's a very challenging child, and sometimes I get pretty low on myself. And my habits were not always all put together, I have to admit. I'd always been very passionate about exercising, fortunately, and a lot of that was, for reasons that I just wanted to look good because it would help me with my confidence. But what I've discovered is that it is a powerful tool for me in order to drive myself to um, feel better about my day and, feel better in my brain. Once I've checked that accomplishment off the list, that's why I've shifted a lot of my training to the morning. Once I get my training out of the way, it really lends itself very well to my mood, my drive, my certainty, and whatnot. I've really been able to lean on that. For a lot of my life, thank God, I've built that as a vehicle. But what I found with a lot of men is that when you become down and depressed, it's very easy to put that aside and not prioritize it because you just don't feel like it. Um, Other things too that were not strong suits was sleep for me in the past. I found myself staying up late. I always thought I was a quote unquote night owl. I remember in chiropractic school, I would be up till 2, 3 in the morning studying some nights. I I remember growing up, I had this alarm clock. I think I inherited from my dad that was just like it sounded like a bomb alarm. Like you ever heard those alarms when hide under your desk, there's an earthquake or a bomb threat, like that kind of thing. And I would sleep through that and flip my family out because they'd be like, "What is wrong with you?" Uh, Morning was never a strong suit for me, but it was just because I was in horrible habits of staying up super late. So, and this continued despite, having even one of my first associate jobs having to be at the office by 6:45. This was has always like a mind over mattress struggle had always been very challenging for me. And a lot of times I'd be dragging ass. Um, Nutrition was always a fascination of mine, and I would, try different diet styles and whatnot. I was never a huge junk food and sort of crap addict, but I was somebody who was a drinker, especially through my 20s, binge drinking a lot. And then alcohol, I, I think my lifestyle was such that I knew that if I drank too much, it wouldn't lend itself to my professional career or my health. So fortunately, I was able to, really pull that back. Although what it looked like was just like a routine low grade drinking, like 1 or 2 a night kind of thing. Like I'd have bottles of wine still, that would I'd drink them over the 2, 3 days, having 1 or 2 glasses a night. Not only would this keep a little bit of excess body fat on my body, it would ruin my sleep even more. So for somebody who, at this point, the way I live is just, it's so vastly different than even 10 years ago. And I think there's a lot of men stuck in these, these self-sabotage cycles. And, for me, that was the case for a long time. And I was grinding myself down so horribly with exercise, that I completely thrashed my hormones, with just cortisol, lack of sleep, routine alcohol, and then just all of the demands of, business and marriage. And I was failing at those and being horrible to myself, and this led to a place where I became like routine and regularly low in my testosterone. And it was interesting because it was just so slow and insidious. it wasn't like I woke up and I was just depressed one day. It was like over time, I just started losing who I was, who I thought I was, or who I used to be. I look back at pictures and I would smile. I would be happy. I would look forward to things. Um, I would be driven. And over time, that just slowly faded. And, my wake up call was the birth of my daughter. And really I guess the last threads of my marriage. And I decided to start my testosterone program for those reasons. It was not for aesthetics. It was not for muscle building. It was not for strength. It was for my mental health. And I understood some of the principles behind this, but I did not know how powerfully my testosterone levels affected my mental health. That's what changed my life was um, was restoring my testosterone. Because not only did it restore my confidence, um, it restored a lot of my drive and my certainty. It restored how I felt in the morning, not only about myself, but about what I needed to do and my doingness, just my like I stopped procrastinating so much and I just started to feel more like myself. And over time, this has led to like the work that I've done that has made my fuse a lot longer, my reactivity a lot less, I'm a lot more graceful to myself, and I'm able to be more at peace. And I want this for more people. And again, I'm just speaking from my own experience. And I know that this is the case for a lot of men because I've spoken to hundreds of men over the last decade through different men's programs. And, all of us are coming from different places where we've been in the pit, is what we call it. Um, we've been in the pit of the stupid shit that we do when we're in the pit, right? When our marriage isn't working, when our business isn't working, when you're failing, you think you're failing as a parent or your health is in the shitter. You just do stupid things. And then you have more self loathing. And then you have nobody to talk to because men tend to isolate. And if you're like me, my first instinct was just to push harder, because it's like, I just need to push through this. It wasn't, my first instinct was not to ask for help. It was to push harder, like work harder, train harder, do more, figure it out. And I think that's what men do in a lot of cases. And I think we've all been conditioned. Well, I think many of us have been conditioned to do so by generations that came before us, that were obviously conditioned through generations of men that came before them. You think about those generations of just like suck it up, rub some dirt on it. Like you think you had it hard. Like I went to war. I worked the farm. I had to do physical labor to break my back to give you the best life. And I I totally understand where this comes from. And I think once you have the perspective and you can see that how that is damaging, um, but also have some empathy for where that comes from, right? I don't blame my parents. I don't blame my family. Like I come from a family that has steep mental health issues. I have brothers who have addiction and mental health issues. My mother, who passed of a brain tumor, she had severe undiagnosed mental health issues. Same with, her other people in her family. Her brother had committed suicide. So yeah, I've seen a lot of this. And what I know, and being in my mid 40s now, and where I can lend the most to this conversation. And I want to be sensitive to, mental health in general, as far as depression, anxiety, and whatnot. And I'm not anti medication, but I want to teach men that they're not alone. Like guys like me have even struggled with this stuff. And you cannot outwork poor physiology. I want you to know that. Like, you cannot outwork like chronic sleep deprivation. You can't outgrind your hormone dysfunction. You can't out hustle a body that's like running on fumes. And I think this is where the entire mental health conversation goes sideways, because somehow we've convinced ourselves that the brain exists separately from the body, right? And your brain is literally an organ inside your body, right? As if poor sleep doesn't affect your mood, and low T and obesity and inflammation, and nutrient deficiencies, right? Everything's connected. And I talk to guys like this almost every day, especially when it comes to the lab work I do, right? Overweight, exhausted, libido's declining, brain fog, anxiety, mood swings, right? And we talk about his health, like, how's your sleep? What sucks, right? How much exercise you getting? It's pretty willy-nilly, right? How much muscle, have you lost? A lot. How much sunlight are you getting? Not much. How many steps are you getting? How much alcohol you drink? Right? You can see where this conversation goes. That's why I'm saying, like, these things are insidious and we minimize them. And, it's biology. You cannot deny biology. You take any healthy man on earth and make him sleep 5 hours a night, gain 30 pounds, stop exercising, stay indoors and, breathe recycled air, stay disconnected from your relationships and hold all your emotions and self-loathing inside, and feed him garbage, right? See how he feels in 90 days. That's not because this man is weak. It's because he's human, right? I want to touch on these because I know you've probably heard other experts talk about how critical these things are, but I want you to know how they're connected to mental health, right? And sleep being one of the most powerful. It's not sexy. No one wants to hear it. But you need to know, like, 70% of people have dysfunctional sleep in America. Everyone wants like a supplement or a peptide or a medication or a hack, right? Or, if you don't sleep, your testosterone drops, your insulin resistance increases, your inflammation increases, your cortisol becomes dysfunctional, your recovery suffers, and then your mental health suffers, your decision-making suffers, right? Your mood regulation suffers, your emotional balance suffers, like everything. And I've seen people spending like thousands of dollars trying to solve a problem that would just improve dramatically if they just simply started fixing their sleep, right? Not just for like a couple days a week, but we're talking consistent, routine, regular sleep, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, when the sun goes down, when the sun goes up. That shit will fix more of your brain fog, mental bullshit than anything. Then there's exercise. And you've heard this quoted 100 times, that exercise outperforms SSRIs in almost every clinical trial that they test them, that they pit them against one another, right? We're talking about, any sort of depression med, right? If the power of exercise could be packaged in a pill, it would be the biggest blockbuster, more so than GLP meds of all time. Like, it improves your mood, your insulin sensitivity, your body composition, your cardio health, your hormone balance, your resilience, your stress tolerance, your cognitive performance, and it's like fucking free. You don't need a gym membership, honestly. You can just run, you can jump, you can do push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, squats. Boom. You did it. And I said this before, one of the reasons that I've trained my entire life and will always train for my whole life and it's not so much about the way I look, it's because of the person I am after I train. Like, I worked out already this morning before I did this podcast, because I feel more locked in, focused, thinking clearly, and I just show up more powerfully. The side effect is that, I like way better how I look when I'm fit than when I'm not. Sunlight. If you listen to mental health experts and they don't speak about sunlight, then they don't know what they're talking about. I'm sorry. There is, clear evidence. And if you just think about it logically, scientifically, anything, like, if you don't get sunlight into your eyeballs, then you're missing out on a vital nutrient, right? If you're spending all day working indoors, driving in a car, watching TV and sitting in your house, and you wonder why you feel awful, we are mammal species. We're designed to be moving our body, being outside in nature, right? Sunlight regulates your circadian rhythm, so it's connected to sleep. So it affects your melatonin production, your cortisol, your sleep quality. Of course, everyone knows about vitamin D, right? So it has a direct correlation to your mood. And it's one of the easiest habits you could implement, and it's free. 10 to 15 minutes of sunlight in your eyeballs in the morning, right? Get some sunlight on your skin, 15 minutes of it before you slather yourself with, sunscreen or put clothing on. Just being outside, breathing fresh air, putting your feet in the dirt. They sell shit like red light therapy and grounding mats. What do you think that replicates? It literally replicates nature. And then I'm not going to go off on nutrition too much. There's so many resources out there that are designed to help teach you how to eat. But, nobody wants to believe that nutrition, everyone wants to believe that nutrition doesn't matter, but it really does. I think people think it matters, but I think they minimize the importance of it when it comes to mental health, I should say, right? We're talking about not just protein-based whole food diet, but the vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that comes with eating real food, right? Omega-3 fatty acids from fish. If you don't take it, you don't eat fish, then take omega-3 fatty acids from good quality sources. Magnesium, vitamin D, right? B vitamins. Making sure you stay insulin sensitive. Right? The brain is the most metabolically active organ in the body. You can't fuel it with garbage and expect a good brain performance, right? And it's not about being perfect. It's about, just staying routine and regular, right? With fueling yourself mostly with good quality, nutritious whole foods, and not processed crap. It's very simple. I know it's just not easy, right? And then the last piece that is hard to wrap your head around because it's a little bit more nebulous, and that's purpose and connection. And this is, I think, where men suffer the most when it comes to like, hey, give me the plan. Like, okay, I can go outside, I can exercise, I can eat this plan, I can sleep, I can take these supplements. But when it comes to this element, it's much different because this requires a degree of like, connection, vulnerability, and honesty with yourself, right? If you feel like you've lost your mission or your edge, it doesn't always mean that you have low testosterone, right? It could just mean that, man, you just need to really take shape of what matters most to you in life and start to look at what goals that you have and what you want to accomplish and communicate that with your family and start to develop your leadership skills, with your children, with your wife, and start to build a bigger purpose than yourself. This is what a lot of people find in God and in the Lord and with their religion, right? With their spirituality, with deciding that it's not all about yourself, right? Finding something that is bigger than yourself to dedicate your life towards. Because you know what? This was part of what really helped me with my mental health is like, I'm not doing this all for me, like taking your eyes off of yourself more and onto others, whether it's like your clients, your friends, your family, your community, people that you love to help. Man, that is so much more rewarding and fulfilling. It is, you cannot get that from like stuff, from like personal accomplishment and stuff. Purpose is so much bigger than that, like service, who you're becoming, right? What are you building? And connection comes along with that, right? This one worries me because men are becoming more increasingly isolated, right? With all the digital shit that we have, like cell phones and media and the 1,000 ways to get a hold of you with email and DMs and phone calls and smoke signals, right? Millions of followers, but not one person to give you a call to ask how you're doing, right? Hundreds of contacts, but nobody knows what's going on in your life, right? Every man needs community. I believe this strongly, right? Every man needs brotherhood, whether that's a small circle or a larger one. Some people find that through the church. Some people find that through CrossFit. Some people find that through groups, and they find it through like service organizations they belong to, wherever it is for you, like just a place where you can be yourself, where you can open up, where you can speak candidly to people that care about you and that you care about, right? Because trying to carry everything yourself gets heavy. And for me personally, this is where like faith enters the conversation too, because that's been more important as I get older, right? It reminds me that it's not all about me. It reminds me that my purpose is bigger than my business, than my physique or my bank account, right? And I just want to end this episode by saying that if you're listening to this, right, and you've been struggling, like here's where I would start. Like before you assume that you're broken, just like talk to somebody. Like it it's there, trust me, there is always somebody who is willing and wanting to listen, who would much rather see you thrive, right, than do something stupid. And then you can, and listen, I can be one of those people. I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime. And I can help you, right? Have more conversations if your sleep is suffering, because it's not easy to get your sleep back on track all the time, or your exercise, or like making sure you're getting outside and getting your steps and your nutrition, your purpose and faith, right? And I just want to make sure, like, it's not necessarily like sometimes what we want, like as a mental health problem, um, sometimes we label as a mental health problem, what we label as a mental health problem is actually like downstream consequences from living disconnected from the things that we are not getting as a mammal species that we absolutely need to thrive and be healthy. And that doesn't mean that therapy isn't valuable. Trust me, my wife and I, we have a therapist. It's huge. Counseling's huge. Medication in right circumstances is huge. If that's reach out, just talk to somebody, right? Have a human conversation. Okay. Where, you can, I have a saying, right, that pain shared is pain divided. And I think there's no truer saying. This is what saved my life with that Wake Up Warrior group back in 2017 to 2020. There's a lot of men that really helped me a lot. And I was able to share with them a lot of stuff that was going on with me that was really painful, really hard to talk about. It was the hardest shit I ever did. Way harder than any like marathon, ultra, Ironman, way harder than any lift than I've ever done. So listen, I'll just close with this. If you're struggling, you need someone to talk to, shoot me a message. I'm happy to talk. Dr. Ryan at weaponizedbody.com, DM me, or just talk to somebody and reach out. Because listen, there's a lot of us have felt similarly, I think, right? Hard times, they come for us all. And it's okay to lean on somebody to help you get through those times. So thanks for listening, everybody. Hopefully it wasn't too much of a bummer episode, but I think it's a super critical topic, super critical conversation, for us men, because it's crazy. Like 3 out of 4 suicides are men. And it's just, we can't talk about this enough in a way that's going to help more men open up. So, I hope I can be a strong voice in that conversation. So look forward to our next conversation, everybody. Thank you, and have an awesome